12-year-old Hakeem Wright sprinted through the narrow alley, his heart pounding like a drumbeat. The laughter behind him echoed like cruel ghosts chasing their prey. His sneakers scraped against the cracked pavement, but the group of white teenagers hot on his heels wasn't slowing down. "Run, boy," one of them jeered, his voice sharp with menace. "See if you can outrun your skin." Hakeem knew better than to stop. He clutched his backpack tightly, the straps digging into his shoulders as fear tightened its grip around his chest. They'd cornered him just as he left the corner store, hurling slurs and taunts before launching into a chase. Now he was racing for his life, unsure if he could make it to safety. Up ahead, the alley split into two paths. Hakeem veered left, hoping the turn would buy him enough time to think. But the leader of the gang, a tall boy with a shaved head and a cruel smirk, was faster than the rest. He lunged forward and grabbed Hakeem's arm, yanking him to the ground. "Gotcha," the boy sneered, looming over him. Hakeem scrambled backward on the ground, his palms scraping against the rough asphalt. "Leave me alone," he shouted, his voice cracking with a mix of anger and fear. The gang surrounded him, their shadows stretching across the walls. There were 5 of them, all older and bigger than Hakeem. The leader, who everyone called Dean, crouched down, his smirk widening as he picked up Hakeem's fallen backpack. "What's this, huh? You stealing from the corner store now?" Dean opened the bag and dumped its contents onto the ground. A water bottle, a notebook, and a pack of pencils spilled out. "Just school stuff," he scoffed. "What are you even doing around here, boy? Don't you know this isn't your neighborhood?" "I live 2 blocks away," Hakeem muttered, his voice trembling but defiant. Dean's smirk twisted into a snarl. "You think you can talk back to me? You don't belong here. You don't belong anywhere." The gang laughed, their voices full of malice. One of them kicked Hakeem's notebook, sending it skidding across the ground. Another stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. But before they could do more, a deep, commanding voice cut through the air like a blade. "Get your hands off my son." The gang froze, their laughter dying instantly. Hakeem turned his head toward the source of the voice and saw his father, Malcolm Wright, standing at the mouth of the alley. He was a towering figure, his broad shoulders casting a shadow that seemed to swallow the gang's bravado. His dark eyes burned with an intensity that made even Dean hesitate. "Who's this?" Dean asked, trying to sound tough but failing to hide the tremor in his voice. Malcolm took a step forward, his military boots thudding against the ground. He was wearing a plain black t-shirt that clung to his muscular frame and a pair of jeans that barely concealed the edge of a knife strapped to his thigh. His stance was calm but lethal, like a coiled spring ready to strike. "I said," Malcolm repeated, his voice low and cold, "get your hands off my son." Dean glanced at his gang, then back at Malcolm. "We're just having a little fun, old man. No need to get involved." Malcolm's lips curled into a humorless smile. "You think chasing a kid down and ganging up on him is fun? That's not fun, that's cowardice." Dean bristled, but the rest of the gang started to back away, sensing the danger in Malcolm's tone. "You don't know who you're messing with," Dean said, though his voice wavered. Malcolm took another step forward, his presence almost suffocating. "And you don't know who you're messing with, son. Let me give you some advice. Walk away now and maybe you won't regret it." Dean's arrogance faltered, and he gestured for his gang to follow him. "This ain't over," he muttered, but the gang was already retreating, their bravado shattered. Hakeem watched them go, his heart still racing. When they were out of sight, Malcolm knelt down and placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "Are you okay?" Hakeem nodded, though tears stung his eyes. "Thanks, Dad. I didn't know what to do." Malcolm's face softened, and he pulled Hakeem into a brief but firm hug. "You did the right thing by staying strong. But we're going to talk about why you were out here alone." As they walked back home, Malcolm's sharp eyes scanned their surroundings, always alert. Hakeem had always known his father was strong, but he didn't fully understand why until now. Malcolm was a retired Marine who had served in some of the most dangerous conflicts overseas. He rarely talked about his time in the military, but the scars on his arms and the distant look in his eyes sometimes spoke louder than words. Later that evening, as Hakeem sat at the kitchen table doing his homework, Malcolm paced the living room, his mind racing. The encounter in the alley had awakened something in him, a fire he thought he'd left behind on the battlefield. He couldn't stand the thought of those boys terrorizing other kids. The next morning, Malcolm decided to pay a visit to the school principal. He wanted to ensure the incident was reported and that the gang members faced consequences. But when he arrived, he found himself stonewalled by bureaucracy and indifference. "We'll look into it," the principal said dismissively, barely glancing up from her paperwork. "But boys will be boys, Mr. Wright. There's only so much we can do. Malcolm's jaw tightened. He knew that attitude all too well, the same dismissive tone he'd encountered during his military service when trying to report injustices. He left the school determined to take matters into his own hands. As Malcolm began digging into the gang's background, he discovered they were part of a larger network of troublemakers in the area. Dean's older brother, Scott, was a known criminal with ties to dangerous groups. Malcolm realized this wasn't just about bullying, it was about a culture of hate and intimidation that needed to be dismantled. Meanwhile, Dean and his gang hadn't forgotten about Malcolm's warning. They began plotting their revenge, targeting Malcolm's family in increasingly sinister ways. One night, Hakeem found a threatening note taped to their front door. "You don't scare us, old man." But Malcolm was far from scared. He started training Hakeem in self-defense, teaching him how to stay calm under pressure and stand up for himself. At the same time, he reached out to other parents in the community, rallying them to take a stand against the gang's behavior. Hakeem's racist hunt reaches its climax when the gang ambushes Malcolm and Hakeem in a park one evening. This time, however, Malcolm is prepared. Using his military training and sharp instincts, he outmaneuvers the gang, disarming them with precision and efficiency. The confrontation ends with the gang subdued and Malcolm delivering a powerful message: hate doesn't make you strong, it makes you weak. And if you ever come near my family again, you'll regret it. The incident at the park marked a turning point. The gang's intimidation tactics were exposed when Malcolm went to the police with evidence he'd gathered, including recordings of their threats. Dean's older brother, Scott, was arrested for his role in orchestrating the gang's activities. At school, the administration was forced to address the issue seriously. Dean and his crew were expelled, and programs were put in place to address bullying and racism. One afternoon, as Malcolm and Hakeem were walking home, they spotted Dean sitting alone on a park bench. He looked smaller somehow, his confidence shattered. Hakeem hesitated. "Dad, should we just ignore him?" Malcolm paused, his gaze steady. "No, son. We don't ignore problems. We face them." He walked over to Dean, who flinched as they approached. "What do you want?" Dean mumbled, not meeting Malcolm's eyes. Malcolm sat down beside him, his tone calm but firm. "I want to know why you're so angry, Dean. Who hurt you so badly that you think hurting others will make it better?" Dean's jaw tightened, and for a moment, it seemed like he wouldn't answer. But then he muttered, "You don't know anything about me." "Maybe not," Malcolm said. "But I know pain when I see it. You don't have to keep carrying it alone." Dean glanced at him, startled. "Why would you care? After everything I did to your son?" "Because hate isn't the answer," Malcolm replied. "It never is. You have a choice, Dean. Keep going down this road and end up like your brother, or decide to be better." Dean didn't say anything, but the tension in his shoulders eased. Hakeem watched the exchange, a new respect for his father growing in his chest. The Wright family became a pillar of strength in the community. Malcolm organized self-defense workshops for local kids and worked with other parents to create a safe environment for everyone. Hakeem, inspired by his father's courage and compassion, started a club at school focused on anti-bullying and inclusivity. One evening, as Malcolm and Hakeem sat on their porch, the sun casting golden hues across the neighborhood, Hakeem turned to his father. "Dad, do you think people like Dean can really change?" Malcolm looked out at the horizon, his expression thoughtful. "Change isn't easy, Hakeem. But everyone has the capacity to choose a better path. Sometimes they just need someone to show them the way." Hakeem nodded, a determined look in his eyes. "Then I want to be that someone. Just like you." Malcolm smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "You already are, son. You already are." As the sun dipped below the horizon, father and son sat side by side, their bond stronger than ever. Together, they were proof that courage, compassion, and resilience could light even the darkest of paths.